who do you think the Bills are closer to? Are they closer to the Chiefs or are they closer to the Jacksonville Jaguars? To
Whoa,
me, I think they're
man.
closer to the Kansas City Chiefs because I think the Diggs not being there is addition by subtraction, kind of like Jeremy Shockey and Eli Manning. You take the distraction player and the wide receiver core away, and the
Hmm.
quarterback is able to advance and go forward. Listen, I'm a Josh Allen supporter. Right now, he has the second shortest MVP odds. I
Right?
think Buffalo is closer to Kansas City than the Houston Texans that everybody loves are. I can see Buffalo in the AFC Championship game before I see the Texans in the AFC Championship game. I think Josh Allen is the sum of the parts. We could talk about Cook. We could talk about Keon Coleman, Dalton Kincaid. But you heard what Mike said. The goal line back is Josh Allen. When the
Hmm.
going gets tough, it's not Diggs. It's not Cooks. When they need a play, Josh Allen makes the play. He's a big enough quarterback to handle that kind of workload. I think he is the weapon. I'm in on the Buffalo Bills this year.
Okay. See, I go the opposite end of the spectrum. And
Okay.
it's not just trading away Diggs for and paying to trade away Diggs, basically, right? Like
Yeah.
Mike brought up the cap trouble they were in before. They had to let people walk away because they were in cap trouble. And then they doubled down by taking the cap hit of trading Diggs. And we can sit here and focus on, the postseason is in your hands, Stephon Diggs. Just catch the damn ball. And I think that's a very good point. When it comes down to I don't think anybody was going to choose Stephon Diggs over Josh Allen if that were the Sophie's
Yeah.
choice that the Buffalo Bills were going to have to make at some point. You can't argue that Josh Allen isn't one of the top five, if not one of the top two or three quarterbacks in the NFL. I'll agree with all of that. The problem for me is I don't think if you want to get rid of Stephon Diggs, go ahead. You didn't replace him. You didn't.
Yeah.
You didn't replace him with Keon Coleman. You didn't replace him with Curtis Samuel, with MVS. None of those guys replaces Stephon Diggs. Khalil Shakir may be the closest thing you have to replacing Diggs just based on the chemistry he'll have with Josh Allen, the two of them knowing each other. And yes, I understand Kincaid and Knox are a big part of it as well. Mike Shope made the great point that those two are going to be on the field a lot. You're going to get a lot of 12 personnel from this team because, again, the lack of wide receiver depth, and they trust their tight ends. But when I look at all of that, when I look at a team that, at least in my opinion, lacks an established deep threat down the field, I look at an offense that's going to face a lot of heavy boxes after what they saw from James Cook last year, knowing that Josh Allen can be that weapon, right? With his feet and his legs as much as his arm. I'm going to force them to beat me on the ground and or not let them beat me on the ground, I should say, and force them to beat me through the air. Because what if these weapons aren't reliable? What if Josh Allen hasn't built a relationship with these weapons? I'm going to keep Josh Allen and James Cook from running all over the place and then say, hey, you know what? If one of the two or three, maybe top five best quarterbacks in the league beats us with his arm, so be it. It is what it is. But we're not gonna give in to a team that showed just how good they can be when they effectively run the ball down the stretch last year.
Yeah, and they're going to have to win by running and playing defense. The less you have to ask Allen to do, the better. But then you get rid of his top weapon, and you're like, okay, well, you're really asking him to do a lot. So when you're asking the quarterback to do a lot, I kind of give you a half a mulligan on the turnovers, which Allen has had a problem with over the
Mm-hmm.
course. I would not be surprised if the Bills last year were probably like, you know what? Let's see what this offense looks like with less Diggs in it in case we want to go in that direction next
Mm-hmm.
year. And there's a guy who had Diggs on some fantasy teams last year. He kind of fell off completely down the stretch.
Yes.
And you're sitting up
Yes.
there like to the point like, am I going to put Stephon Diggs on the bench? Obviously, you can't do that because he can go off and have the big blow up at any moment. But I think that they probably looked at it coming into this season as, okay, this is what we're going to be without Diggs. We're going to run the ball and we're going to play excellent defense. And that's how we make it back to the AFC Championship. But they're putting everything on Allen. Everything's on Allen. I think he can handle it. I've done a 360 on Allen. I came
Yeah.
on this same program and called him a AFC Dak Prescott. He's better than Dak Prescott. in
I
that
I think
most
he's better than
significant
Dak as
February.
well, but I don't think
Yeah,
that's a terrible argument when you talk about taking what's around you and whether you elevate everybody around you or you drag them kicking and screaming. Like Dak has shown he's not really like when you use the
no,
phrase sum of the parts, I think Dak, right? He's the sum of the parts. He's only as good as CD Lamb allows him to be, right? And the
yeah,
rest of the weapons around him. Josh Allen, I think, is not just the capstone and the keystone to what they do on offense in Buffalo. You take him away, and the rest of it just crumbles to pieces. He is what makes everybody else on that offense go. And I don't, again, I'm sitting here telling you, I agree that Josh Allen is one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in this league, but I don't know if the pieces and the parts around him are enough that he can drag them kicking and screaming beyond 9 or 10 wins. And so I think plus 130 on under the 9.5, at least in my opinion, is a really tempting price. Plus 150 to miss the playoffs is a really tempting price for me on Buffalo right now. I like that better than, say, plus 165 to win the division or 750 to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. That computes more
So
for
let
me.
me
And
ask you this: if wild card weekend,
mhm.
Buffalo, Indianapolis, in Buffalo, who wins that game?
Oh, Buffalo wins that game, but I'm not as big on
Uh,
Indy as a lot of other folks.
okay, let's go. Okay, so same weekend, wild card weekend,
Mhm.
Houston, Buffalo, in Buffalo.
I would, if you, especially if you're giving me points, which I imagine the Texans would get in that position, I'm going Houston.
You're taking the points with Houston. All right, so I would say so. Then my question would have been the next weekend. Let's say Buffalo wins the game in Houston. The next weekend they go on the road to Cincinnati.
Cincy.
Yeah. So you don't have
Yeah.
them in the AFC Championship game.
No, I respect what you
Do you have them
the
in the
point.
division round?
It depends who they play in the wild card. It depends
Okay.
how that shakes out. I understand what you're saying, and I think it's a good point when you try to put them on the spectrum between the Kansas Cities and the Baltimores of the AFC, and the Texans and the Jets or the Dolphins or the Jaguars of the AFC. I guess I get putting them closer on the spectrum to the Kansas Cities and Baltimores, right? I do. But I think that Cincy for me, and I've said this a lot, is much closer to the Kansas City Baltimore spectrum when Joe Burrow is healthy, and we didn't
I
see that the
agree.
whole second half of last year, and people have forgotten about that. Buffalo, even with a healthy Josh Allen, when I look at the rest of the pieces and the parts around him on that offense, is like dead in the middle between those two groups. Like it's Kansas City, Baltimore, uh, Cincinnati on one end, and then if I'm down here at the other end of the spectrum with Houston and maybe the rest of the AFC playoff potentials, Jets, Dolphins, Jags, Colts, I guess. Um, I'm putting Buffalo a little bit closer to that group. But I do think we agree on one thing. It's very clear. I think most football fans would agree on, just like I said at the top of this segment, it all hinges on Josh Allen. 9-1 to win the MVP. He's second on
Yeah.
the board there at BetMGM, tied with Joe Burrow. They do bring in Keon Coleman, 25-1 to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. James Cook comes back. You would think to carry the ball just as much, maybe not more around the goal line, just 2 touchdowns last year. And they try to get over some losses on the back end of the defense. But it goes as Josh Allen goes.
Yep, no doubt. And you can definitely tell that as people get into the month of August, Joe, and they're starting to get ready for their fantasy and their futures and their season long prop bets and stuff like that. What's so interesting about Josh Allen is the fact that he has a specific role, and that's to do it all guy, Mr. Everything. Right now, he's going off the board in fantasy drafts as QB1, numero uno, going in about the third round. And you know what? The rushing upside and the fact that they rely on him to get everything done, that makes him exactly that, the top quarterback in fantasy. I have no disagreements or doubts about that. MVP odds for Josh Allen. I think there was a real big push for Josh Allen about 2 years ago. So now we're going to start to see voter fatigue on Mahomes and
Mm-hmm.
Jackson. Burrow is probably the biggest competitor in the AFC. In the NFC, you see if somebody emerges, besides Jalen Hurts, I really don't see it. With that being said, I'm changed courses on Allen. I think he's a good player. I think that he has to do it all for Buffalo. I think he's going to be great statistically. And listen, it's probably not going to end up where the Buffalo Bills fans wanted to end up, but it's not because of Josh Allen as opposed to what I thought last year.
Yeah, his number for passing yards at BetMGM, individual season long player prop, 3,750 yards and the hook. I don't see any way he doesn't hit that number, Corey. Like, I understand the
Right.
transition they've had in this offense. Stephon Diggs is gone. You're trying to figure out who's going to step into that role, even for a guy like myself who doesn't think they've done anything or done enough, I should say, to replace Stephon Diggs. He gets to that number easily, I think. I mean, he hasn't been anything less than 4,200 in the last 4 years.
Chris, if he doesn't get to that number, it's because he's hurt. That's
Right.
really it. That's the only way he doesn't get to that number.